I'm pretty obsessed with insects. I first became interested in them as a child. I can remember playing under the trees, under the pine trees in our backyard. It was like a fortress of pine trees. I could run all the way underneath them when I was, in kindergarten or so. And all the neighborhood kids would come over, and there was always a lot of cicadas in those trees. And there still are. And I was just impressed by the cacophony, just the noise that such a small insect could produce. There was sort of a magical element when I was a child, and it carried over into adulthood and into my artwork, but now I sort of balance out that magical side, and I say magical, I know a lot of people try to depict it like I'm some nymph running through the forest. It's actually quite the opposite. I have my tweezers and my test jars and my killing jars, and will sometimes, take to the forest and capture my own specimens. So as an adult, it became more about the science and the exploration of it. Insects they still hold a mystery for me. I guess they probably always will. I started using insects in my work in 2005. I was in my studio working, and I was making some collages or assemblages, and I noticed I had a small jar, an old farmhouse style salt shaker with a screw-on lid and a little tiny glass handle, and my grandmother had filled it full of butterflies that she caught. She loved monarchs and their mimics, and I took a few of them apart and started putting them into assemblages. It sort of took off from there, and I think a year after that I built the beetle abacus, a working abacus made entirely of beetles, which was a pretty fun piece to make, and people love to touch, of course, obviously. From there, I had some pretty grand plans, but while I love working with the specimens, I started to sort of become a little disappointed with creating something out of other materials. I wanted to start creating something with my own hand, so I started drawing and painting and storytelling on paper and on canvas using the insects and using all the research that I'd done. I do quite a lot of research about insects and their myths. So I'm very interested in the behavior of insects and the mythology that comes out of that. Like, wasps were said to spring from the bodies of dead horses, and that in one way is true, because wasps, a lot of wasps are parasitic, so they will spring from many different types of bodies, but people used to think that that's where they came from, or from mud, because many insects need to imbibe mud or salt to procreate. And then there's the myth of Eos and the cicada singing to her forever. That's one of my favorite ones. So I guess it all goes back to cicadas for me, because that's an insect that sort of lives in my inner landscape. We live on the shores of Lake Michigan, not exactly where I grew up, but in a very similar habitat historically. And it's just amazing to watch the insect activity that happens here. So I get a lot of my specimens actually from where we live. And I use what we find at the beach. I use what comes to the end of its natural life cycle outdoors, like the cicada killer, which is a giant wasp that drags up to 16 cicadas into a burrow underground and lays an egg inside of each of the cicadas, and the wasp larva develops and eats the cicada from the inside. I like to joke that I have a dealer in China because many of my specimens, like the more exotic, the Goliath beetle or the really amazing butterflies, and many of my beetles, they come from a dealer in China, and he sources them from around the world. So, but I do like to find, insects that have come to the end of their life cycle, and the occasional headless dragonfly and that sort of thing. They're really fun to draw. They're really exciting to see in their natural habitat. I have gone out to collect my own specimens, but now I prefer to go on expeditions with scientists and talk to researchers, and the entomology department at the Field Museum is an amazing resource, and the Indiana Dunes is they have lots of insect programs. So, yeah, it's just really exciting.